If you're hearing this, then I guess you're curious about who I am, where I come from, and how I ended up here. The truth is, my story didn't start on Earth. My name is Clark Kent, but before that, before Kansas, before Smallville, I was Kal-El. I was born on a planet called Krypton. Before I continue, if you love comics and superheroes and want to learn more about their lives, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people find these stories and keeps hope alive in every corner of the world. I don't remember it, of course. Everything I know about my birth world came from the messages my father, Jor-El, left for me. He was a scientist, one of the best on Krypton. He discovered that our planet's core was unstable, that we didn't have much time. No one believed him, not the council, not the leaders. They dismissed him, but he was right. Krypton was dying. With the planet's end approaching, my father and my mother, Laura, made the hardest decision any parents could. They built a small ship, just big enough for a baby, and placed me inside. I wish I could remember their faces in that moment, but I've only ever seen them in the recordings. They wrapped me in a blanket bearing our family crest, the symbol of hope, and launched me into space. I traveled light years, alone, while Krypton crumbled behind me. My ship flew through the void, until it reached Earth, until it found Smallville. Jonathan and Martha Kent were the first faces I saw, two ordinary people living a quiet life on a Kansas farm. They found me in a field, inside a crater surrounded by smoke and fire. They should have been afraid. I would have understood if they'd run, but they didn't. They picked me up and held me like I was theirs, and from that day forward, I was. They named me Clark Kent. They raised me like any other boy. School in the mornings, chores in the afternoons, dinner at 6. But even then, things were different. I was different. I remember the first time I realized it. I must have been around 6 or 7. I tripped while running through the barn, and I hit the ground hard. But I didn't cry. I didn't bleed. I didn't even bruise. A few days later, I lifted our tractor to get a ball that had rolled underneath. It didn't feel heavy. It felt normal. As I got older, the differences became harder to ignore. I could see things I wasn't supposed to. I could hear conversations from across the field. I started keeping it all inside, scared of what it meant. But my parents, they always knew. They never made me feel like a freak. One night my dad took me out to the barn. He pulled back a tarp, and underneath it was the ship, the one I came in. That's when he told me everything. It was hard to understand, harder to accept, but looking back now, I think it was the first time I started to feel whole. I wasn't just Clark Kent, the awkward kid from Smallville. I was someone else too, someone with a past I hadn't chosen, but a future I could still shape. Eventually, I activated the crystal inside the ship, and that's when I met him, my biological father, Jor-El, or at least a projection of him. He told me about Krypton, about why they sent me away, about what I could become. Not a god, not a weapon, but a symbol, a guide, someone who could help this world be better. I didn't fully understand it then, maybe I still don't, but that was the beginning, the moment I realized I had a responsibility, not just to my powers, but to the people around me, to the ones who raised me, to the ones who'd one day need me. That's where my story starts, not in a spaceship, not even on Krypton, but in a field, in the arms of two people who chose to love a child they didn't understand. I used to think I was just clumsy. When I was little, I'd trip a lot, over roots in the field, over tools in the barn, over nothing at all. But the weird thing was, I never really got hurt. I'd land hard, sometimes on rocks or the edge of the old truck bed, and just bounce up. No scrapes, no bruises. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just a kid. Kids don't question it when they're told they're special by their mom. But then there were the times I'd see things I shouldn't be able to. A friend would be walking through the hallway at school, and I'd notice I could see the pencil in their backpack through the fabric, or I'd hear my parents whispering in the kitchen, even though I was all the way upstairs with the door shut and the TV on. I thought maybe something was wrong with me. For a while, I didn't say anything. I remember one summer evening, one of those perfect golden Kansas sunsets. I was maybe 10 or 11. I was out by the barn, tossing a ball up into the air and catching it, over and over, just letting time drift. I threw it too high. It went soaring up, higher than I meant it to, and instinctively, I jumped. And I didn't come back down. Not right away. For a few seconds, I was just there, hanging in the air, floating. Then I panicked and crashed down, knocking the wind out of myself for the first and only time I can remember. I sat there, stunned, the ball forgotten in the grass. I looked at my hands, then up at the sky, and I knew, right then, that I was something else. That night, I told my parents. I expected fear, maybe anger. But they didn't yell, they didn't send me away. My dad sat me down on the porch and handed me a glass of lemonade. I remember the ice clinking in the glass. He said, "Clark, there's something I think you're old enough to see." We went to the barn. He opened the cellar door beneath the old workbench. Down there, covered in a tarp and dust and memories, was the ship. The same one I had arrived in. He told me everything, about the night they found me, about the crater in the field, about the blanket with the strange symbol. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just stood there, staring at that ship, knowing, truly knowing, that I wasn't like anyone else. Over the next few years, things changed fast. My senses sharpened. I could read an entire book in minutes. I could hear people talking across town. I tried to hide it at school, but sometimes I'd slip. I broke a desk by leaning on it too hard. I shattered a window with a sneeze. One of the scariest moments happened during gym class. We were running sprints, and I got caught up in the rush. I ran too fast, way too fast. I finished a lap before anyone else even got halfway. Everyone stared. I laughed it off, pretended I tripped and cut through the middle of the track. No one really bought it. The older I got, the more I realized these weren't things I could just suppress. They were part of me. I'd stand in the middle of the cornfield at night and just listen to the insects, to the hum of electricity in the fences, to the soft breath of my mom sleeping upstairs. It was overwhelming sometimes, like my brain was trying to tune into every frequency at once. That's when the headaches started. There were days I couldn't even sit in class. The buzzing lights, the chalk on the board, the endless chatter. It all crashed in on me. I'd ask to go to the nurse's office, and then I'd just lie there with my eyes shut, trying to make it stop. Eventually, I told my parents about that too. My mom suggested we try something. She made a blindfold from an old bandana and had me wear it while she read to me. I had to focus on her voice, nothing else. That's how I learned control. Not all at once, not perfectly, but slowly, through practice. My dad said, "Son, these gifts, they're not a curse, but they are a responsibility. One day, you'll have to choose what kind of man you're going to be, not because of what you can do, but because of what you decide to do with it." Those words stuck with me, still do. I spent most of my teenage years walking that tightrope, trying to be normal, knowing I wasn't, trying to be careful, knowing I couldn't always be, and always wondering when, not if, I'd have to stop hiding. That moment came sooner than I expected. You know, sometimes I miss those early days in Smallville, before I knew what I really was, before I had to think about saving the world or hiding who I am. Back then, life felt simple, safer, but even then the world was shifting under my feet, and I didn't know it yet. We lived in a small farmhouse, about a mile outside of town. Worn white paint, a red barn with a crooked weather vane, and a wraparound porch where my dad liked to read the paper every morning. The kitchen always smelled like fresh bread or apple pie, depending on what my mom was baking. And the air, Kansas air, is a kind of clean you don't find anywhere else. Mornings started early. I'd help Dad with the animals, carry bales of hay that should have been too heavy for a boy my age, pretending it was all muscle and grit. I got good at pretending, at acting like I wasn't seeing things other people couldn't, hearing things no one else could. School was harder, not because I couldn't keep up. If anything, it was the opposite. I had to hold back, to dumb myself down just enough to blend in. Let others win races I could have finished in a blink. Miss questions on tests I could have solved with half my brain asleep. I hated it, honestly. It felt like lying. But I had friends. Pete Ross, Lana Lang, Chloe Sullivan, later on. They made things easier. I liked them. Lana especially. She had this easy confidence, a laugh that could disarm a room. I had a crush on her for as long as I can remember. But I never told her, not then, not while I still had secrets. Still, Smallville wasn't all sunshine and front porch swings. There were incidents, close calls, the time I caught a car before it could crush Mr. Willis during a flash flood. I claimed adrenaline. He didn't question it. Or the time I reacted too fast during a football scrimmage and knocked another kid clean off his feet. They called it a lucky tackle. I called it almost being exposed. My parents, God, they were patient. Every time I messed up, every time I came too close to revealing what I could do, they'd talk me down. Remind me that I had to be careful, that the world might not understand me if they knew the truth. And deep down, I understood. But I didn't like it. Hiding felt wrong. There was a night, I think I was 15, when I ran out into the fields, overwhelmed. I had heard too much at once. Conversations from miles away, a dog barking 3 towns over, heartbeats of people I'd never met. It all crashed into me, one giant, roaring wave of sound. I collapsed in the middle of the corn, clutching my head. My mom found me there. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me in the dark, brushing my hair back, humming softly until I could breathe again. That's the thing about my parents. They never tried to fix me. They just stood by me, always. There were moments of joy too. I remember flying for the first time, not just floating, but really flying. I was alone, in the hills just beyond Miller's Creek. I took off without meaning to, driven by instinct or emotion, I don't even know. The sky opened up, and suddenly I was above the trees, the barns, the rivers. Everything was so small, and I felt free. I landed hard, got the wind knocked out of me again, but I laughed the whole walk home. I held on to those years for as long as I could. I think I knew, even then, that they wouldn't last. That one day, I'd have to step out of the fields and into something bigger, something dangerous. But for a little while, Smallville was enough. High school was the first real test, not just of my powers, but of my patience, of my control. I was still living a double life, even if no one knew it. On the surface, I was just Clark Kent, the quiet kid from the farm who kept his head down and did his chores. But underneath that, I was something else entirely. And every day at Smallville High, I had to pretend I wasn't. I sat through classes where I already knew the answers, not because I was some genius, but because my brain could process information faster than most people could speak it. I had to stop myself from correcting teachers too quickly, from reacting when I heard a student whisper something rude from across the room. I heard everything, every rumor, every insult, every whispered crush, every lie. Gym class was the worst. I was tall and athletic. There was no hiding that, but if I ever tried, even a little, I stood out. I remember dodgeball games where I let myself get hit on purpose just so the others wouldn't get suspicious. Track and field days where I faked shortness of breath to explain why I didn't shatter records. It was a strange kind of loneliness to hold back so much of yourself just to make others comfortable. Then came the close calls. One winter afternoon, I was walking home with Lana. It had snowed earlier that day, and the roads were still slick. A truck skidded out of control coming around a curve. It was headed straight for her. Without thinking, I moved. 1 second we were talking, the next she was behind me, and the truck's grill was inches from my chest. I caught it. Just like that. Arms outstretched, boots sliding in the snow, but I caught it before it hit us. The driver blacked out. The front of the truck crumpled like paper. When I looked back at Lana, her eyes were wide. I said something about momentum and physics, about adrenaline. She didn't press it, but I could tell she didn't fully believe me. Word spread fast. People called it luck. Some said it was a miracle. I just called it another secret to carry. There were other moments. A fire in the school cafeteria. I helped the lunch lady out before the smoke even got thick. A gas leak near the chemistry lab. I moved faster than anyone could track, turned the valve before it exploded. Nobody questioned it too hard. I think most people didn't want to believe something unusual was happening in their sleepy little town, but I started to feel it. This pull, like the world outside Smallville was calling to me, even if I wasn't ready to answer. Sometimes I'd go out to the edge of the Kent farm late at night, stand by the fence line, and stare up at the stars, wondering where I came from. What else was out there? Who else might be like me? Or if I was truly alone. My dad used to say, "You've got the heart of this town, Clark. But your story, it's not meant to stay here." I didn't know what he meant at the time. Not fully, but I think I do now. I was a teenager, sure, but the world wasn't going to wait for me to grow up. Leaving Smallville wasn't one big moment. It was a slow unraveling, a sense that something was ending, even if I couldn't quite admit it out loud. I remember the way my dad looked at me that spring, quiet, proud, but with a weight behind his eyes, like he knew what was coming before I did. And maybe he did. Maybe parents always know, deep down, when their kids are about to outgrow the world they built around them. The decision started like most big ones do, with a letter. I'd applied to a few universities, mostly to keep up appearances, but one stood out, Metropolis University, not because of the programs or the scholarships, but because it was Metropolis, the city, big lights, bigger shadows. I didn't tell anyone at first, not even Lana, that I was seriously considering it, but late at night, I'd find myself reading about the city's skyline, its history, its pulse, and I'd imagine myself there, not as Clark Kent the farm boy, but as something more. When I told my parents, my mom smiled right away. She always wanted more for me than Smallville could offer. My dad just nodded, let out a long breath, and said, "We knew this day would come." That summer was quiet, but not peaceful. I found myself memorizing everything, the smell of the wheat, the sound of crickets at night, the way the porch boards creaked under my feet. I started helping out around town more, as if some part of me was trying to give back before I left. Fixing fences, running errands, even cleaning up after storms. No one asked me to, but I needed it. Closure, maybe. Lana and I had one last long walk the week before I left. We talked about everything and nothing. She asked if I'd stay in touch. I told her I would. I meant it. But I think we both knew things wouldn't be the same. She hugged me a little longer than usual, and I felt it, that space between who we were and who we were becoming. Packing was harder than I expected. I didn't have much, some books, old clothes, a few keepsakes, but when I looked at the boxes, I realized it wasn't the stuff that was heavy. It was the life I was folding up inside them. My dad handed me a box, wrapped in cloth. Inside was the crystal from my ship. "You'll know when to use it," he said. I asked him if he was scared for me. He said, "Every day, but I trust you." and that's stronger than fear. The morning I left, the sky was clear. My mom made pancakes. My dad loaded the truck. We didn't say much, just a lot of quiet glances and silent thanks. As we pulled out of the driveway, I looked back at the farmhouse, at the barn, at the fields that raised me, and I knew this was goodbye. Not forever, but for now. I wasn't just leaving home. I was leaving behind the version of me that only Smallville had known. The kid who could lift a tractor, but still didn't know how to say what he was feeling. The boy who could hear a pin drop 2 towns over but still couldn't figure out where he belonged. Metropolis. Even saying the name felt like something big, like destiny wrapped in steel and glass. The first time I saw the skyline, I was in the passenger seat of a beat-up pickup, staring out through bug-smudged windows. We crested a hill, and there it was, towers rising like they were trying to scrape the sky clean. The sun hit the daily planet globe just right, casting a golden glow across the upper windows. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my dad nudged me and said, "Quite a sight, huh?" We stayed one night at a motel near the campus. It was small and musty, with buzzing lights and thin walls. I couldn't sleep. I sat up, thinking about everything I was leaving behind, and everything I was about to step into. I remember looking out that window at the endless rows of lights, thinking, how do I fit into all of this? My parents dropped me off the next morning. Mom straightened my shirt collar one last time. Dad shook my hand a little longer than usual. We didn't do teary goodbyes. We weren't that kind of family, but their eyes said everything. Campus life was a culture shock. People moved faster, talked faster, lived louder. It took time to adjust. I was still the kid who said yes ma'am and held doors open. Some people thought it was charming, others thought it was weird. I kept my head down at first, focused on my studies, journalism, mostly. I wasn't sure why it drew me in. Maybe because it was about truth, about seeing what others missed, and maybe I was tired of hiding mine. I rented a tiny room above a corner store. The walls were thin, and the heat only worked when it wanted to, but it was mine. For the first time, I was really on my own, and it felt good, scary too, but good. I got a part-time job delivering coffee and mail at the Daily Planet. Not glamorous, but it got me in the building. I remember the first time I stepped into that newsroom, phones ringing, reporters shouting, printers whirring. It felt alive. And then there was her, Lois Lane. I'd heard the name before. Everyone had. She was the rising star, the front page firestorm. She moved through the room like she owned it. Confidence, edge, purpose. I was invisible to her that first week. Just another intern juggling coffee trays, but I watched, listened, learned. Even then, I could tell she was the kind of person who'd dig until she found the truth, even if it hurt, especially if it hurt. Meanwhile, I kept to myself, did my work, took night walks across the city rooftops when no one was looking. I didn't fly yet, not in the open, but I'd leap, long, careful jumps, testing the limits, watching the world from above. One night, I stopped a mugging in an alley. No mask, no costume, just quick reflexes and a hoodie pulled low. The guy ran off. The woman I helped never saw my face, but she whispered, "Thank you," and something in me shifted. Maybe I couldn't stay hidden forever. Maybe there was more I could be doing, more I should be doing. I still had the crystal, still hadn't used it, but I felt it in my pocket sometimes, pressing against me like a heartbeat, a reminder of who I really was. I was becoming something new, still Clark Kent, but not just Clark Kent. Metropolis didn't care who you were. It didn't slow down for anyone. not for farm boys from Kansas, not for aspiring journalists with calloused hands and polite smiles, and certainly not for someone carrying secrets as heavy as mine. Those first few weeks were rough. Between classes, part-time shifts at the Planet, and city noise that never ever stopped, I barely had time to think. I missed the silence of the fields, the way night used to feel like a blanket, not a buzzing neon haze. Here, even the dark had a hum to it. I kept to myself at the Planet. I didn't want to draw attention. I'd slip stories to the editors under someone else's name. Small tips, observations, things I'd overhear or notice when no one else was paying attention. They started calling it the ghost wire. Little bits of useful intel that always seemed to show up just in time. No one knew it was me, except one person, Jimmy Olsen. He was a young photographer, eager, sharp-eyed, and always in a rush. One day he caught me slipping a note under Perry White's door. I thought he'd call me out, maybe report me, but he didn't. He just smiled and said, "You're the guy, huh?" That's how our friendship started. He didn't press, didn't make it weird. He just accepted me. And over time, I realized how rare that was. Lois, meanwhile, was everything I'd heard and more. She was bold, tireless, and relentless, always chasing the truth, always asking the hard questions. She had this way of making everyone in the room feel like they were either in her way or part of her story. I admired her. From a distance at first, then a little closer, then closer still. But I knew I had to stay careful. I still wasn't ready to be anything more than a shadow, not yet. That changed one night. I was heading home late, walking, not flying, just trying to clear my head. I passed an alley where a group of people were crowded around something, or someone. A man was on the ground, bleeding, his wallet gone. No one was helping, just filming, watching. I stepped in, calmed the crowd, lifted him gently. His eyes were swollen shut, but he grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Don't let them win." I got him to a hospital without anyone seeing me move, but the words stuck, "Don't let them win." That same week, I went up to the roof of my building. The city looked different from above, quieter, like a map waiting to be read. I closed my eyes, listened. Sirens, screams, silence, layers of sound and stories, all asking the same question, "Where are you?" I went back to the crystal. The moment I placed it in the panel that had folded out from the spacecraft's alloy, something activated. The air shimmered, light filled the room, and there he was, Jor-El, my father in voice and form. He told me things I wasn't ready to hear, about my people, my legacy, my purpose. He didn't tell me who to be, but he made it clear Earth was my home now, and its people. They needed someone who could do what others couldn't, someone who could inspire, protect, hope. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed on the roof until dawn, watching the city wake up, and in the stillness, I made a decision. You never forget the first time you fly, not just leaping or hovering, but really flying, feeling the air wrap around you, lifting you higher than anything you've ever known. But that moment didn't come right away. Not until I finally put the suit on. It was evening. The sky had gone purple, the kind of color you only see between day and night, when the world holds its breath. I was standing alone in the barn, not the one in Smallville. This one was on the outskirts of Metropolis, a place I'd found and quietly rebuilt, tucked far enough from the city that no one came asking questions. The suit was there, laid out across a workbench, not store-bought, not something I sewed together from scraps. It came from the ship, from Krypton. When I placed the crystal into the console that day, It had revealed things I hadn't seen before, holograms of cities long gone, the language of my ancestors, and then, the chamber. In that chamber, the suit had been waiting, dark blue with crimson accents, a flowing red cape, and on the chest, the symbol I'd seen since I was a baby, S, though it wasn't really an S. It stood for hope. I ran my hand across the fabric. It shimmered subtly, stronger than anything I'd ever touched, light as air but unterrible, flexible but protective, like it had been made not just to wear, but to become. When I finally put it on, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. For a second I felt like I was pretending, like a kid in a costume. But then I stood up straight, took a breath, and something clicked. This was who I was always meant to be. That night, the city needed help. I didn't know it yet, but a shuttle launch had gone wrong. A private aerospace firm was testing a new orbital transport from the upper docks near the harbor. Something had malfunctioned. Flames, panic, dozens of lives at risk. I heard it before the reports hit the wires. I took off, instinct guiding me, and then I flew. Not a jump, not a glide, real weightless flight. I didn't question how, I just moved, faster than I thought possible, over rooftops, past clouds, straight toward the smoke. The shuttle was spinning, fire trailing from its undercarriage, engines sputtering. People screamed from the rooftop launch pad. I didn't hesitate. I caught the shuttle. It was heavier than anything I'd lifted before. My arms shook. The heat singed my suit, but I held it, slowed it, stabilized it just long enough for the crew to regain control. When it landed safely, people ran toward the wreckage, toward the crew, toward the miracle. And then, they saw me. I didn't speak, I just hovered above them, cape flowing in the updraft, unsure if I should smile, wave, vanish. A little girl pointed and whispered, "Look, up in the sky." That was it, the moment the world saw me, not as Clark, not as a stranger, but as something new. The next day the planet's headline read, "Who is Superman?" They named me before I could introduce myself. The next morning, my face, well, not my face exactly, but the image of me in the sky was everywhere. Newspapers, radio, television, social feeds, street corners buzzing with theories. People didn't know what to call me at first. Some said the Flying Man, others the Red Blur, but the name that stuck was the one the Daily Planet used in its headline, Superman. I didn't pick the name. I didn't even know it had been given to me until I walked past a newsstand and saw it in bold print, and for a moment, I froze. It felt surreal, like watching a story unfold about someone else. Inside the planet, chaos reigned. Reporters scrambling, phones ringing non-stop, everyone shouting over each other. Perry White barked orders like a general mid-battle. Lois was furious, not because I'd saved the shuttle, but because she hadn't gotten the story first. She stormed through the bullpen demanding answers, trying to find witnesses, anything to give her a lead. And me, I just walked in with a coffee tray and kept my head down. That day, I watched the world react to me while pretending I wasn't the reason for the noise. Some people were amazed, inspired. Kids wore makeshift capes in the streets. Old-timers said I reminded them of something out of the old serials. A symbol of hope, they called me, but not everyone saw it that way. Talk shows debated if I was a threat. Politicians questioned where I came from. Scientists speculated about my biology. There were rumors I was a government experiment, a weapon, an alien invasion's first scout. The fear crept in fast. I understood it. People fear what they don't understand. And I was something they'd never seen before. I could lift buildings, fly faster than jets, hear a whisper from 10 blocks away. That kind of power, it makes people nervous. But I didn't run from it. That week I stopped a bridge collapse, caught a train before it derailed, helped extinguish a chemical fire before it reached a hospital. Every time I showed up in the open, no shadows, no mystery, just me in the suit, doing what needed to be done. I never stayed long, just enough to help. Then I was gone, and slowly, things began to shift. A firefighter passed me a water bottle and said, "Thanks, Superman." A child handed me a drawing, me holding the sun. A woman whispered that she felt safe again for the first time in years. It wasn't about the praise or the spotlight. It was about the impact. I saw it in their eyes, the way fear softened into wonder, the way doubt gave way to belief. Still, I knew I had a long road ahead. Not everyone would accept me. Not everyone would trust me. But I didn't come to be worshipped. I came to serve, to protect, to stand in the gap where others couldn't. The world had seen me, and now, they were starting to believe in me. Being Superman wasn't just about rescue missions and front-page stories. It was about risk, about stepping into danger when no one else could. And sometimes, that meant facing someone who wanted to hurt you, not because of who you were, but because of what you represented. My first real fight wasn't in the shadows. It was downtown, broad daylight, right in front of the people I'd sworn to protect. It started with a name, John Corbin, a career mercenary, muscle for hire. He'd worked jobs across the globe, dirty ones, no allegiance, no conscience, just contracts and carnage. The last time he disappeared, people assumed he'd retired or been taken out by a rival, but he hadn't vanished. He'd been transformed. I got the call through a fire dispatcher, reports of a mechanical figure tearing through 6th Avenue. Cars flipped, power lines down, civilians trapped. When I arrived, I saw him. Corbin, or what was left of him, was something else now, more machine than man. His entire body had been reinforced with stolen tech and experimental cybernetics. Green energy pulsed through the metal plates that wrapped around his arms and chest, and at the center of his chest, a glowing shard of kryptonite. I didn't know what it was at first. I just knew the moment I got close, everything changed. My strength faltered, my vision blurred, my breath caught in my throat like someone had pressed a vice around my lungs. He grinned. "You're not so tough up close, are you?" The pain was immediate and sharp, not like anything I'd felt before. I stumbled, trying to regain control, but every step closer to that crystal made things worse. People were watching, filming, screaming, and I was on my knees. I'd never felt powerless before, never truly understood fear like that. Not until that moment. He hit me hard, sent me crashing into a parked bus, metal twisted, glass shattered. I heard someone cry out, but I couldn't move. Then something changed. I saw a child, maybe 6 or 7, huddled behind a car just a few feet from Corbin's rampage. He hadn't noticed her, but I had, and I knew, if I didn't stand up, she wouldn't make it. Pain still burning through my chest, I dug deep, not into my powers, but into my will. I forced myself to my feet, grabbed a steel beam from the wreckage, and used it to knock Corbin back. The beam sparked against his chest, but it was enough to disorient him. I used the moment to fly, straight up out of his range. High above the city, I caught my breath. The weakness faded as the distance between us grew. Kryptonite. That's what the crystal was, a remnant of my home, a piece of the world that birthed me, now being used to destroy me. I came back in hard and fast, avoiding his chest. I struck from angles, moved faster than he could track. I couldn't overpower him directly, but I could outthink him. Finally, I managed to rip the kryptonite core from his chest. I hurled it into the harbor, far enough to give me breathing room. Corbin collapsed, sparks trailing from his back as the systems failed. Authorities arrived minutes later. They didn't know what to make of what they'd seen. Neither did I. That night, I stood on a rooftop overlooking the harbor. My chest still ached, not from the blows, but from what I'd learned. I could bleed, I could fall, and there were people out there who would stop at nothing to make that happen. The shard in Corbin's chest haunted me. Even after the fight ended, even after the bruises healed, I couldn't get it out of my head. That glowing green crystal, it didn't just hurt me. It weakened something deeper, something I didn't know I had. I needed answers. That night, I flew back to the harbor, found the spot where I'd hurled the shard into the water. I scanned the area with my vision, until I saw the faint glow under the surface. Retrieving it wasn't easy. Even touching it again made my knees buckle, but I wrapped it in layers of lead pipe and steel, then sealed it inside a reinforced vault beneath my hidden workshop. I ran tests. I didn't have the lab tech I really needed, but I had my senses. I could see how it vibrated, almost like it was alive. I could hear the faint hum it gave off. The closer I got, the more my powers dimmed. My strength, my sight, even my ability to float, it all unraveled in its presence. I remembered the way Jor-El had spoken of Krypton, of its destruction, of the volatile core. I started to wonder, was this a piece of that, a fragment of my home world, transformed by its final collapse? I went back to the ship. The chamber opened with the crystal again. I asked Jor-El directly, "What is this thing? Why does it hurt me?" The hologram flickered, and then, calmly, Jor-El spoke. "Kryptonite, a radioactive fragment of our planet, formed in the explosion of Krypton's core. It resonates with the unique energy of Kryptonian biology. Long-term exposure weakens you. Prolonged contact may be fatal." I stood there, quiet. A part of my world had survived, but not in the way I'd hoped. Worse, someone had found it, and weaponized it. Corbin didn't graft that crystal into himself. Someone gave it to him, built the tech around it, knew what it could do to me, even before I did. I started tracing the tech, subtle trademarks, patterns in the metal alloys. I didn't have access to official records, but the black market chatter was loud enough if you knew how to listen, and one name kept coming up, LexCorp. I'd heard of it before, of course. Everyone had. One of the most powerful companies in Metropolis. Defense contracts, advanced robotics, energy solutions, public donations to hospitals and schools. But behind the PR curtain, whispers of something else. Unchecked experiments, disappearing scientists, shell companies that dealt in tech no one admitted existed, and at the center of it all, Lex Luthor. I'd never met him, not yet, but I'd seen the pictures, the interviews, the polished charisma, the eyes that never smiled, even when his mouth did. He was brilliant, respected, feared, and now I knew, he'd found Kryptonite. The moment I realized that, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I wasn't just saving people from accidents or crime. There was intent now. A hand behind the curtain. Someone was watching me, testing me, planning for the day I might fall. There's a difference between facing a monster in the street and sitting across from one in a tailored suit. The first time I met Lex Luthor, I wasn't in the suit. I was just Clark Kent, reporter. No cape, no flight, just a notebook and a borrowed tie. The planet had sent me to cover a press event. LexCorp was unveiling a new line of autonomous medical drones, designed to deliver aid during disasters. They hovered silently, armed with syringes and scanners, efficient and cold like everything else that bore Lex's brand. I remember how clean everything was. The building, the staff, the script. It was sterile, curated to the last detail. But underneath it all, something felt wrong. like being in a room that looked fine but smelled faintly of smoke. He walked onto the stage like he owned the city. And in some ways he did. Lex Luthor, immaculate suit, bald head gleaming under the lights, smile sharpened to a knife's edge. He spoke with precision, charm, and just enough condescension to remind you he was the smartest man in the room. After the event, he did a quick meet and greet with select press. Somehow, I made the cut. Or maybe, he wanted me there. Clark Kent, he said, holding my business card up between two fingers. The farm boy from Smallville. I've read your work. I kept my tone casual. Didn't realize you were into local reporting. I make it a habit to know who's writing about me, especially the ones who ask real questions. His eyes didn't blink much. When he looked at you, it was like being under a microscope. You got the sense he wasn't just reading your expression, he was calculating your temperature, pulse, micro reactions. You've had quite a bit to say about my defense contracts, he said. I think the public deserves to know where their tax dollars are going. He chuckled. And yet, when a man falls from the sky and starts catching planes, you don't think the public deserves to know where he came from. There it was, the mask slipping just enough. I don't write about rumors, I replied. Moon. But you live them. That stopped me. Not the words themselves, but the way he said them. Like he was speaking to someone else underneath my skin. He poured himself a drink, offered me one. I declined. He sipped his with slow deliberation. You know, he said, walking to the window, people don't really want heroes. They want structure, predictability, control. You show them someone who bends the laws of physics, someone who can rip open tanks or fly through walls, and that structure begins to crack. He turned to me. It doesn't matter how noble your intentions are. If people are afraid, they'll demand someone who can keep you in check. And that someone's you. No, he said. That someone is the idea of accountability. I just happen to be the one who's building the tools. He didn't say kryptonite. He didn't need to. I left that building knowing two things for certain. 1. Lex Luthor had already decided I was a threat. 2. He wasn't going to come at me with fists. He was going to come at me with perception, policy, and fear. And in many ways, that was more dangerous. It started with a whisper, a rumor here, a headline there, little things, doubts, questions, stories framed just the right way to make people look at me a little differently. At first it was subtle. Should Superman be regulated? Who watches the sky? Alien intervention, the ethics of off-world power, the kind of articles that didn't accuse outright, but seeded doubt, the kind of questions that felt responsible, balanced, but underneath, they chipped away at something fragile, trust. It didn't come from just one source, it was coordinated, spread across multiple outlets, forums, political speeches, talking heads debating my motives. Was I working alone? Did I represent someone else? What if I turned? What if I made a mistake? What if, someday, I decided Earth wasn't worth protecting, and all of it had Lex's fingerprints? Not literally, but it was his style, his structure, the slow erosion of reputation by implication. He didn't need to accuse me of anything. He just needed the public to ask questions long enough for fear to set in. Then came the incident. A freighter lost control in the Atlantic. Engines malfunctioned. I heard the mayday and arrived within seconds. I lifted the vessel out of danger, redirected its course, and made sure the crew was safe. But what I didn't know was that one of the cargo holds, unmarked, sealed tight, contained sensitive military equipment, weapons, illegal in half the world, and LexCorp had the shipping contract. Within hours, the footage was everywhere, not of the rescue, but of me opening the hold, of weapons exposed to the open sea. The story wasn't Superman saves 300 lives, it was Superman interferes with government operation. They twisted it, said I'd violated international law, that I was undermining national security. People panicked. Countries demanded answers. Political leaders called for action. There were talks of sanctions, of protocols, of oversight. Suddenly I wasn't just a symbol of hope, I was a wild card. The streets changed. Some still cheered when they saw me, but others looked away. Some crossed to the other side. Graffiti appeared overnight. No gods, no watchmen. I tried to speak. I gave interviews, stood calmly, respectfully. I answered every question they threw at me, but no matter what I said, the doubt kept spreading. That's when I knew what Lex had done. He'd figured out my greatest vulnerability, and it wasn't kryptonite, it was people, their perception, their fear, their willingness to believe the worst when they didn't understand the truth. I could catch missiles, stop earthquakes, fly into space and back without blinking, but I couldn't fight suspicion, not with strength, not with speed, only with time and hope. When the world starts to doubt you, you have two choices: disappear or show them who you really are. I chose the second. It didn't happen all at once. There was no speech I could give, no one-time act that would erase the fear Lex had planted. If I wanted to rebuild trust, I'd have to do it the only way that's ever worked, by being there, every day, for everyone. The rescues never stopped. I still heard every cry for help, every bridge collapse, every fire, every runaway train. But now, I made it a point to stay after the crisis ended, not to pose, not to defend myself, just to help. When I stopped a flood outside Midvale, I didn't fly off. I stayed, helped stack sandbags, carried clean water, listened to people's stories. When a hospital lost power during a blizzard, I stood outside in the cold for 6 hours, literally holding the satellite dish in place with one hand and the emergency generator with the other, just so patients could stay alive. When a boy in Dakota fell into a well, I didn't just pull him out. I sat with him afterward, wrapped him in my cape, and waited until his parents arrived. He kept asking me if I was real. "Are you really Superman?" "Yeah," I said. "But tonight, I'm just a guy who's glad you're okay." It wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes I just walked through neighborhoods, listened, waved. I fixed roofs, helped with crops after hailstorms. I found lost pets. I laughed with kids. The headlines didn't always cover it. Lex didn't stop his campaign, but something changed in the way people looked at me. One woman in Gotham ran out of her apartment just to hand me a thermos of coffee. A tired EMT in Central City gave me a quiet nod after a long night shift. A firefighter in Chicago whispered, "Thanks for coming back." People started drawing me again, not as a weapon, but as a neighbor. Still, I knew rebuilding trust would always be fragile. One mistake, one misunderstanding, and the cycle could start over. But I kept showing up, because that's what people needed, not perfection, presence. That's the difference. The day I really knew I was winning people back was the day I made a mistake. I was too late to stop a landslide from damaging a small town in the Rockies. Homes were crushed, roads destroyed. No one died, thank God, but I couldn't save everything. I stood in the rubble, apologizing, saying I should have heard it sooner, reacted faster, and someone, a man covered in dust, bleeding from a cut on his temple, put a hand on my shoulder and said, "We know you tried. You came." That's enough. That moment stayed with me more than all the applause, all the praise, because trust isn't built on being flawless. It's built on being faithful. I've seen the stars from both directions, from below, standing in Kansas fields, and from above, floating miles above Earth's surface. But nothing prepares you for the moment something comes out of that sky, and it isn't a comet, or a satellite, or a shuttle, it's a ship. The first time I saw one, it was barely past midnight. I was on patrol over the Atlantic, scanning coastlines. Calm night, quiet. Then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Not thunder, not machinery. It was a low, thrumming frequency that vibrated in my bones. I looked up. At first it was just a speck, a dark shape against a canvas of stars, but it was moving fast, faster than any Earth-made craft had a right to. I moved to intercept. As I got closer, the shape came into focus. Not a missile, not a satellite. It was long, curved, covered in hull plating that shimmered like obsidian. No engines I could see, no heat signature, just motion, impossible, silent motion. And then, it stopped. Mid-air, it hovered above the ocean, about 40 miles off the east coast. I stayed back, cautious. It didn't open fire, didn't scan, just hovered. I circled it once, slowly, no visible markings, no insignia, just a single illuminated panel on its underside. Then came the voice. It didn't come from speakers or radio signals. It spoke directly into my mind. You are not alone. I froze. My heart didn't race. I don't think it could in that moment, but my mind did. How did it know that name? Krypton. No one outside my family knew. Not even the people of Earth really understood what it meant. The ship didn't wait for a response. It descended, slowly, deliberately, into the ocean. Not crashed, landed, vanished beneath the surface without a ripple. For a long time, I just floated there, alone in the dark. That night, I didn't go home. I didn't sleep. I flew back to the fortress, activated the crystal. Jor-El's projection appeared, and I asked him the question I'd never said out loud. Are there others? He didn't hesitate. Yes. Kryptonians? I asked. He nodded. Survivors, scattered across systems, some lost, some hidden. A few may even thrive. But not all are what you would hope them to be. That was the first time I heard the name Zod. A general, a leader, a war criminal, exiled from Krypton before its end. Jor-El told me the Phantom Zone had been used as a prison dimension, and some of the prisoners survived, escaped. Zod had been among them. Jor-El looked me in the eyes, or as much as a hologram could, and said, "If he comes here, you must be ready. He will not see Earth as a sanctuary. He will see it as a conquest." I stood in the fortress for a long time after that, trying to reconcile what I'd just learned. I wasn't alone, but maybe that wasn't a good thing. When he finally came, it didn't feel like an invasion. Not at first. It started with every screen going black. Phones, televisions, billboards, air traffic control systems, even satellites glitched. Then one by one, the screens lit up, static cleared, and his face appeared. He spoke in dozens of languages at once, his voice calm, measured, authoritative. "My name is General Druzod, of the Kryptonian High Command. I come seeking one of my own." He didn't mention Earth by name, he didn't call for war, but his message was clear. "Kal-El, you are hiding among them. They are fragile. Their survival depends on your surrender. You have 24 Earth hours." Then the broadcast ended. I remember the silence afterward. The city, always so loud, so alive, it felt like someone had sucked all the air out of the sky. People turned to me, not literally. They didn't know who I was, but in spirit, every eye was searching. Every headline, every conversation. Who is Kal-El? Where is he hiding? Will he surrender? I didn't wait long. I went to the fortress. Jor-El confirmed everything. Zod had survived the Phantom Zone, and he wasn't alone. A small group of followers, warriors bred for combat, hardened by exile, had escaped with him, and now they'd found Earth. "He will not reason," Jor-El warned me. "He does not seek kinship, he seeks control." Still, I couldn't just attack. I needed to understand. So I did something reckless. I made myself visible. Superman appeared. On rooftops. In daylight. I didn't run. Didn't hide. And it worked. They came. The sky cracked open over Metropolis. A vessel descended, sleek, sharp and black as night. A single figure stepped out, not armored, not armed, just tall, proud, pale eyes cold as winter. Zod. When we faced each other, there was a strange recognition between us. He looked at me, not as a stranger, but as someone who should have known better. You wear the crest of the House of El, he said. I do, I answered. And yet you kneel to these insects. I protect them. He stepped closer. You're wasting your gift. These people, they crawl through mud, while you could lead them into the stars. I'm not here to rule. Then you're unfit to carry the blood of Krypton. He offered me a place beside him, told me I could help build a new Krypton, right here. That Earth could be reshaped into something better, stronger, that no one would ever doubt me again. All I had to do was let go of Earth, of its fragility, of my loyalty. I didn't answer with words. I flew, faster than I'd ever moved, straight into the sky, and he followed. That was the beginning. The first strike wasn't a war, it was a test. Strength against strength, power against power. I fought him above the clouds, across the stratosphere, down through the sea. But I wasn't just fighting to win, I was fighting to remind myself who I was. There are moments when you stop being a symbol and start being a soldier. My battle with Zod wasn't just a test of strength, it was a test of everything I believed in. Because he didn't just come for me, he came for Earth. We clashed first over the Atlantic, a thunderous impact that sent waves crashing for miles. His blows were relentless, precise, every strike calculated, not just to hurt, but to dominate. He was stronger than I expected, trained in combat from birth, his movements sharp and efficient, and he was learning, adapting to Earth's sun with every passing second, his strength growing. I pushed him toward open water to minimize damage. We slammed through waves, punched through cloud banks. The sound alone echoed across continents, but he wouldn't be drawn away for long. He turned inland, straight toward Metropolis. That's when I knew what he really wanted. Not just me, not surrender. He wanted Earth to see what a Kryptonian could do. I chased him through the city, weaving between buildings, using every ounce of control to avoid collateral damage. But even with all my restraint, the city trembled. Zod didn't hold back. He hurled vehicles, crushed steel, tore through concrete. Civilians screamed and scattered, and I had to make impossible choices every second. Do I stop him now, or save the people in his path? A falling train car, a collapsing bridge, a school bus teetering on the edge of a crumbling overpass. I saved who I could, but I couldn't be everywhere, and Zod knew it. He laughed as I gasped for breath. You choose them over your own kind, he growled. They will never understand you. They will fear you. I don't need them to understand, I said. I just need them to live. We collided mid-air, the shockwave shattering windows across 5 blocks. He drove me into the ground, a crater ripping through a construction site. Dust filled the air. My cape torn, my suit scorched. Then came the worst moment. He found them, a family, trapped beneath debris, huddled, terrified. He raised his hand, energy building in his eyes. Heat vision aimed straight at them. You choose them, then watch them die. I shouted, pleaded, but he didn't stop. So I did the only thing I could. I wrapped my arm around his throat, and I broke his neck. Silence. He dropped, motionless. I stood over him, trembling. The family sobbed nearby, alive, safe, but I couldn't look them in the eye, because in that moment, I wasn't a symbol. I was a man who made a choice, the only one I could. The battle ended in silence. No cheers, no applause, just dust, twisted steel, and a city that would never be the same. I didn't speak to anyone that day. I couldn't. Zod's body lay still where he fell. Around us, Metropolis was a scarred landscape, skyscrapers with their spines cracked, roads split open, fires flickering in every direction. Emergency sirens pierced the haze, but even they felt distant, muffled, like everything was happening underwater. People stared, some afraid, some grateful, most uncertain. I didn't blame them. I flew away without a word, back to the fortress, back to the one place I didn't have to pretend. I asked Jor-El the question I never wanted to ask. Was there another way? He didn't answer with data or judgment. He just said, only you could make that choice, and only you must carry it. I thought I understood what being Superman meant, but I didn't. Not fully, not until that moment. It's not just about saving people, it's about living with the choices you make when saving them comes at a cost, and the cost that day was heavy. The world reacted fast. Some hailed me as a hero, said I'd saved the planet, that I'd proven Earth had a champion. Others questioned it, the destruction, the casualties, the fact that I'd killed. For the first time, they asked not what I could do, but what I would do if I ever crossed the line again. Lex Luthor seized the moment. Of course, he gave interviews, talked about responsibility, about how power without oversight was danger in disguise. He didn't say my name, he didn't have to. And me? I stayed quiet. I rebuilt, helped clear debris, lifted beams, dug people out of rubble, not as Superman, just as a man with work gloves and a shovel. That's when I met a woman named Elena. She ran a small bakery near the edge of the destruction zone. Her building was gone, flattened, but every morning she came with a folding table and handed out bread and water to whoever passed. She saw me once, still covered in soot, eyes red, cape torn. You did what you had to, she said. I didn't reply, she just smiled. Next time, don't wait to ask for help. That stuck with me, because I realized she was right. Being Superman doesn't mean doing everything alone. It means knowing when to stand tall, and when to lean on the people you protect. The world would rebuild. I would too, slowly, brick by brick, life by life. But I'd never forget that moment. The silence after the battle, the weight of being judge, jury, and the reluctant executioner. Next time, I'll tell you how I began building something more than just trust, how I helped create a team, one that would protect the world together. Part 19, Forming the Justice League. There's a point when even the strongest among us realize, we can't do this alone. After Zod, after Metropolis, after everything I'd lost, and everything I'd learned, I knew something had to change. I couldn't be everywhere. I couldn't carry the weight of the world alone, not anymore. The threats were growing, bigger, smarter. Not all of them wore armor or came with glowing green rocks. Some came from beyond the stars, others from deep within the earth, and some from inside the human heart. The first to approach me wasn't who I expected. It was Bruce Wayne. I'd known of him, of course, Gotham's elusive billionaire, but his other identity, that was a different story. When we met, it wasn't as Bruce and Clark, it was as Batman and Superman. We didn't get along right away. We were too different. His world was shadows and contingency plans. Mine was sunlight and second chances. He saw danger in every corner. I tried to see potential, but under it all we both wanted the same thing to protect. He told me about threats coming, ones even he couldn't handle alone. He said he'd been watching others, people with gifts, with power. He wanted to bring us together, not to form an army, but a shield, a league. I was cautious, not because I didn't believe in the idea, but because I knew what it meant, opening yourself up, trusting others, sharing the burden. But when I met the others, I saw something more. Diana, a warrior, a diplomat, a legend. Her strength matched mine, but her heart, wiser. She had seen more war than I could imagine. and still chose peace. She believed in humanity, even when it broke her heart. Arthur, a king who never asked to be one, half of two worlds, never fully belonging to either, but his sense of duty ran deep. He spoke of oceans like they were alive, sacred, angry, protective, buried, young, restless, a mind moving faster than the world around him. He brought levity, yes, but also perspective. He reminded us what it meant to be inspired by heroes, and to want to become one. Victor, part man, part machine, still finding the balance. But behind the circuitry, he had a soul, one scarred by loss, but unwilling to surrender. His intelligence rivaled Bruce's, and his resilience, unmatched. Together, we weren't perfect. We argued, we failed, but we came back, again and again, because we knew something no one else did. This world doesn't just need power, it needs unity. We trained, planned, fought side by side, stopped a rogue AI in Japan, a dimension rift in Central America, an ancient threat buried beneath the Arctic Circle. Each time, we grew closer, stronger, not just as warriors, but as people. We called ourselves the Justice League, and for the first time since Krypton, I didn't feel alone.
There's a point when even the strongest among us realize we can't do this alone. After Zod, after Metropolis, after everything I'd lost and everything I'd learned, I knew something had to change. I couldn't be everywhere. I couldn't carry the weight of the world alone. Not anymore. The threats were growing, bigger, smarter. Not all of them wore armor or came with glowing green rocks. Some came from beyond the stars, others from deep within the earth, and some from inside the human heart. The first to approach me wasn't who I expected. It was Bruce Wayne. I'd known of him, of course, Gotham's elusive billionaire, but his other identity, that was a different story. When we met, it wasn't as Bruce and Clark, it was as Batman and Superman. We didn't get along right away. We were too different. His world was shadows and contingency plans. Mine was sunlight and second chances. He saw danger in every corner. I tried to see potential, but under it all, we both wanted the same thing to protect. He told me about threats coming, ones even he couldn't handle alone. He said he'd been watching others, people with gifts, with power. He wanted to bring us together, not to form an army, but a shield, a league. I was cautious, not because I didn't believe in the idea, but because I knew what it meant, opening yourself up, trusting others, sharing the burden. But when I met the others, I saw something more. Diana, a warrior, a diplomat, a legend. Her strength matched mine, but her heart, wiser. She had seen more war than I could imagine, and still chose peace. She believed in humanity, even when it broke her heart. Arthur, a king who never asked to be one, half of two worlds, never fully belonging to either, but his sense of duty ran deep. He spoke of oceans like they were alive, sacred, angry, protective, buried, young, restless, a mind moving faster than the world around him. He brought levity, yes, but also perspective. He reminded us what it meant to be inspired by heroes, and to want to become one. Victor, part man, part machine, still finding the balance, but behind the circuitry, he had a soul, one scarred by loss, but unwilling to surrender. His intelligence rivaled Bruce's, and his resilience, unmatched. Together we weren't perfect. We argued, we failed, but we came back, again and again, because we knew something no one else did. This world doesn't just need power, it needs unity. We trained, planned, fought side by side, stopped a rogue AI in Japan, a dimension rift in Central America, an ancient threat buried beneath the Arctic Circle. Each time we grew closer, stronger, not just as warriors, but as people. We called ourselves the Justice League, and for the first time since Krypton, I didn't feel alone. We called ourselves the Justice League, but a name isn't armor. And no matter how powerful we weren't invincible. The battle that nearly broke us began with a warning, one too faint to understand, too late to prepare. It came from deep space, a signal bouncing between satellites, a frequency Jones, our Martian ally, decoded with urgency in his voice I'd never heard before. The message was old, ancient even, a distress call or maybe a warning. It spoke of a being who consumed, not for conquest, not for cruelty, but for something more frightening, inevitability. His name was Darkseid. At first we didn't believe it. He was myth, a story whispered between alien civilizations, a tyrant from the world of Apocalypse, where suffering wasn't just a consequence but a doctrine. We didn't get to debate for long. The first boom tube opened over the Indian Ocean. The sky cracked, and from it came parademons, flying soldiers with wings like blades and eyes that burned with hive rage. Swarms of them, and behind them, the generals, Steppenwolf, Granny Goodness, Caliban, all heralds of Darkseid. We fought them across continents: Gotham, Thebes, Rio, Central City, Atlantis, Themyscira. Each member of the League was stretched to their limits. I held up collapsing buildings while simultaneously fighting swarms in the air. Diana dueled Steppenwolf blade to blade on a battlefield littered with burning trees. Arthur led oceanic defenses. Barry saved entire trainloads of civilians in seconds. And still, we were losing ground. Because every time we won a battle, they opened another front. Every time we caught our breath, they pushed harder, and then, he arrived. Darkseid didn't come like a conqueror. Came like gravity, like inevitability, tall, silent, radiating power that made the air crackle. His eyes never blinked. His voice was a whisper that echoed like thunder. Kal-El, he said, you defy the fate of your world. I protect it, I replied. You prolong the illusion. This planet will fall, as Krypton did. Then he unleashed the Omega beams. I'd read about them, seen recordings, but facing them, it was like trying to outrun fate itself. They moved with intelligence, purpose. They didn't just aim, they hunted. I dodged, barely. They tore through mountains, left craters in oceans. We fought, all of us, together, and we lost. Darkseid shattered the League, not with raw power, but with doubt, fear, vision. He showed us each a glimpse of failure, worlds crumbling, loved ones gone, futures where we turned on each other, where hope died. I saw Earth burning, Lois gone, and in my hands I held the tattered cape of someone I couldn't save. I dropped to my knees, but Diana stood. Arthur roared. Barry reached out. Bruce gritted his teeth, bruised and bloodied, and simply said, "We're not done." And I remembered who we were. I stood. We rallied. Together we turned the tide, not with strength, but with unity, with belief, with the one thing Darkseid couldn't understand. We chose this world, and we would fight for it. He retreated, not defeated, but denied. The sky healed, the earth quieted. We stood, shaken, scarred, but standing. Victory doesn't always feel like a triumph. Sometimes it feels like silence, like exhaustion, like standing on the edge of something you can't name, wondering what's left of you on the other side. After Darkseid retreated, Earth was still standing, but barely. Entire cities had been scarred. Forests burned. Oceans churned. And though the sky was clear again, the world felt different, like the atmosphere itself had been stretched too far and hadn't fully snapped back. We had survived, but we hadn't escaped. I remember the first sunrise after the battle. I stood on top of the Daily Planet building, cape torn, suit still scorched. The streets below were quiet, not abandoned, just reverent. People were waking up, seeing what was left, checking who was still there. We all went home, eventually, to our cities,
to our corners of the world, to the places where we were more than just heroes. I went to Smallville. The fields hadn't changed. The porch still creaked. My mom was waiting with coffee in silence. We didn't talk much. We just sat. Sometimes, that's all you need to remember who you are. The League met weeks later, not to plan, not to train, but to talk, to grieve. Bruce didn't speak for a long time. Diana brought flowers for the lives we couldn't save. Barry cracked a joke that didn't land, then apologized. Arthur drank. Victor just stared at the stars. We didn't know how to be after that, because something fundamental had shifted. Darkseid didn't just test our strength. He tested our faith in ourselves, in each other, in the idea that we could always win. And yet something else had grown in the rubble. Trust. Not the kind built on shared ideals, but the kind forged in fire. We'd seen each other at our lowest, watched each other nearly fall apart, and still we came back. That meant something. People asked if we'd won. I didn't know how to answer. Darkseid would return. We all knew that. He'd wait, watch, plot. His absence wasn't peace, it was preparation, but we were preparing too. I worked with scientists to develop early warning systems. Diana returned to Themyscira to open new diplomatic ties. Bruce began constructing something he called the Watchtower, an orbital base, high above the Earth. We weren't waiting to be attacked again. We were building a future, one that could stand. I found myself talking to people more, not just in crises, but in moments that mattered. Graduations, funerals, vigils, town halls. Sometimes they asked hard questions. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they just needed to know I was listening, and I was. Because after the storm, that's what matters most, that someone's still there. No one prepares you for fatherhood. Not when you're Superman. Not when you've seen stars collapse and tyrants rise. Not when you've saved worlds. Because no matter how much you've done, nothing humbles you like holding your child for the first time. His name is John. Jonathan Samuel Kent. Named after two of the strongest people I've ever known. My Earth father, Jonathan Kent, and Lois's father, General Sam Lane. Two men who couldn't have been more different, but who both, in their own ways, taught me about strength. When John was born, I remember staring at him in the quiet of the hospital room. He was small, fragile, pink cheeks and dark hair, and all I could think was, he's real. All the battles, the headlines, the galaxies, it all disappeared in that moment. Just me, Lois, and him. I was terrified, not of him, but of myself. Would I be enough? Could I teach him what it meant to be human, when I still struggled with that myself? What if he had powers? What if he didn't? What if I wasn't there one day, and he needed me? Lois put her hand on mine, and whispered, "You already are enough." John didn't cry much, but when he did, his lungs were powerful, almost too powerful. I noticed it first when he was a toddler. He kicked a ball and sent it clear across the park. No one else thought twice, but I saw it. I started testing, gently, asking him to play catch, to race me across the yard. At first, nothing unusual. Then, one day, he tripped and scraped his knee. He didn't cry, didn't even bleed. That's when I knew. He was like me, half Kryptonian, half human. A blend of two worlds, just like I was. But his journey wouldn't be mine. He was raised with love, with safety, with me there. He wouldn't grow up wondering where he came from. He'd always know. I didn't rush him. When his powers started showing more clearly, heat vision, strength, floating, I took him to the fortress, showed him Krypton, let Jor-El's recordings speak to him, as they once had to me. He asked if he'd have to save the world. I said, "Only if you want to," and he smiled. "I just want to make people feel safe." That's when I knew. He didn't have to be me. He'd become something better, something uniquely his. There were bumps, of course, school bullies, accidental outbursts, sleepless nights. He once sneezed and shattered every window in the house. But through it all, he kept one hand on hope, the same way I always had. One night, I found him sitting on the roof, staring at the stars. "Do you think they're watching us?" he asked. "The Kryptonians." "Maybe," I said. "But what matters is that you're here, and you're doing good." He nodded. "I want to help, like you." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "You already are." There are moments that remind you why you do it all, why you carry the weight, take the risks, live two lives. For me, one of those moments happened just after sunset, over the Kansas cornfields, with my son. John had been training in secret for months. Not formal drills, not the way Bruce would have done it, but quiet moments, lifting hay bales, practicing control, using heat vision on fence posts, floating a few inches above the ground, and laughing like it was the best trick in the world. He was ready. I could feel it, but more importantly, he felt it. One evening, he came to me on the porch. "Dad," he said, "can we try? For real this time?" I nodded. "Let's go." We walked out past the barn, through the golden field, the sun dipping just below the hills, the same field where I learned to fly, where I'd stood, years ago, terrified and exhilarated. "Close your eyes," I told him. "Breathe. Don't force it. Just feel it." He did, arms at his sides, face calm. I hovered beside him, just a few feet off the ground, no pressure, just presence. And then, he rose, an inch, then two, then a foot. His eyes popped open, wide with disbelief. "I'm doing it," he whispered. "Yes, you are." He lost it for a second, wobbled, dropped, then tried again. This time he steadied, held himself in the air, looked at me, grinned. "Ready?" I asked. He nodded. We took off together, not fast, not high, just enough to feel the wind in our faces and the weightlessness settle in. We soared over the fields, his laughter trailing behind us like a song. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. That flight was his rite of passage, his moment. Eventually, we climbed higher, broke through the clouds. He gasped when he saw the stars, closer, clearer, endless. "This is what you see all the time?" he asked. "Every day," I said, "but it's better with you here." We landed on a quiet peak near the Rockies, the snow glowing blue in the moonlight. He stood there, arms out, breathing hard. "I want to help more," he said. "I want to be part of it, the saving, the protecting." "You already are," I told him, "but there's more to it than powers. You need heart, judgment, empathy." He looked at me. "You'll help me learn, always." From that day on, he wasn't just my son, he was Superboy, and I wasn't alone anymore. Being a hero is one thing. Being responsible for a hero in training, that's another. Our first mission wasn't planned. Most aren't. John and I had been flying patrol over the West Coast. A quiet night, cool air, the city below twinkling in peace. I was pointing out air traffic patterns, how to distinguish radio towers from emergency signals, when the call came through. A volcanic tremor, off the coast. A research station, remote, isolated, had lost contact. I heard the panic in the dispatcher's voice. I turned to John. "You ready?" He hesitated for just a second. "Let's go." We flew fast. I told him to stay close, observe, listen. This wasn't a test, it was a lesson. But I saw the fire in his eyes. He wanted to prove something. When we arrived, the scene was chaos. The island's only research facility was halfway submerged in rising magma, the tremors splitting earth like paper. Steam hissed through cracks, and the air burned with sulfur. There were still people inside. I gave John the plan. Clear the upper levels,
Get them to the ridge. I'll stabilize the foundation. He nodded and zipped off. No fear, just focus. I dove beneath the island, found the pressure point deep below, and began shifting plates with sheer force, cooling the fault line, redistributing pressure. It was like holding back a tide with my hands. Above, I could hear shouts. I looked up. John was carrying 2 scientists, carefully flying them to safety. He landed them on the ridge, and immediately went back for more. But then came the explosion. A secondary vent erupted. Lava launched into the sky like a cannon blast. I shot upward to shield the ridge, forming a barrier with my body. It burned, but it held. And John, he flew into the fire, not recklessly, not blindly. He saw a researcher trapped under debris, near the edge of a fissure. No time for me to get there, no time for hesitation. He dove, gritted his teeth, lifted the beam, and pulled her free. I met them mid-air, took her from his arms, saw the soot on his face, the shaking in his hands. "You did good," I said. He smiled. "She's okay," and that was all that mattered to him. We got everyone out. The facility was lost, but every person survived. And that night, John learned something more important than how to fly, or lift or see through walls. He learned what it meant to carry life in your hands. Later, on a quiet rooftop, I asked him how he felt. "Tired," he said, "but good tired. The kind that means you did something right." I smiled. That's what being Superman feels like. The hardest part of being a father isn't the danger, it's the letting go. John had trained, fought, rescued. He'd done everything right, but when he came to me that morning, standing tall, calm, his suit cleaned and pressed, I knew something was different. "Dad," he said, "I think I'm ready." He meant alone. No backup, no shadow, no safety net. Part of me wanted to say no, to tell him there'd always be time, more time, that he could wait just a little longer. But that wasn't true. I looked him in the eye and said, "Where to?" He'd picked a mission himself. A small city in Southeast Asia, suffering from repeated landslides during the rainy season. The terrain was unstable. Relief teams had been trying to clear access routes, but the weather was relentless. John didn't want to be flashy. He wanted to help. I watched him take off, clean arc through the clouds, silent as thought, and then I waited, not hovering above, not tracking him through satellites, just waiting. It was the longest 8 hours of my life. When he returned, he was drenched in mud, bruised, covered in scrapes, but beaming. "They called me Little Superman," he said. "Did it feel right?" I asked. He nodded. "Not because they said it, because I earned it." He told me everything. How he helped reroute a river with careful bursts of heat vision. How he dug through a collapsed school to find a trapped teacher. How he stayed when it was over to play soccer with the kids. No news cameras, no interviews, just presence. I told him I was proud. He said, "You don't need to say it." I know, but I said it anyway. That night, I found myself thinking about my own first mission, how different it had felt, how alone I'd been. John wasn't alone. He had me. He had Lois. He had the League. He had hope behind him from the start, and that made all the difference. Letting him go didn't mean letting go of who I was. It meant trusting who he was becoming. There comes a moment when you see someone not as who they were, but as who they've become. For John, that moment came when I couldn't be there. It started with something small, a tremor on Mars, a seismic spike from deep beneath its surface. Normally, I wouldn't have gone, but John requested my help, said something didn't feel right. So I went. I told Lois I'd be back by morning. I wasn't, because what we found wasn't just tectonic activity, it was a trap. I was buried under a collapsed cavern, my comms jammed. John and I were cut off, and Earth was left without its Superman. And that's when it happened. A global emergency, a coordinated attack, simultaneous cyber and physical strikes on major power grids, blackouts, fires, collapsing infrastructure, and no signal from me. John was home, in Metropolis, just a kid in his suit, helping his mom with groceries. When the news broke, he didn't hesitate. He put on the cape, not mine, his. He contacted the League, organized the response, flew across time zones to deliver emergency supplies, rerouted planes by sheer force, evacuated hospitals, held up a collapsing dam in Nepal for 13 minutes until reinforcements arrived. Reporters tried to chase him. He didn't stop for interviews. He just worked. And when they asked, "Where's Superman?" he simply said, "He'll be back. For now, you've got me." I heard all this later from Bruce, from Diana, from the news feeds. John managed to show me underground. I watched my son become the symbol, not because he was trying to replace me, but because he understood exactly what the world needed in that moment. He didn't fill my boots, he made his own. By the time I returned, the crisis had passed. The lights were coming back on. People were breathing again. I landed on the planet rooftop. John was already there, arms crossed, looking out at the city. His cape caught the wind just right. "You were watching?" he asked. "Every second," I said. He turned to me. "I didn't want to mess it up." "You didn't." That night, the papers didn't say Superboy saves the world. They said, Superman returns. But the photo? It was John, standing tall. There's something surreal about standing next to someone who wears the same crest you do, not just the same colors or cape, but the symbol, the S, that has come to mean hope for so many. And knowing that the person beside you is your son, it changes what that symbol means entirely. The first time John flew into action without me, I was proud, but I was worried too. Not because I doubted his strength or his heart, but because I knew the weight that comes with being Superman. It's more than fighting villains. It's being watched constantly. It's being trusted completely. And the moment you falter, even just once, that trust can shatter. But John didn't falter. He soared. And he didn't just mimic what I had done. He made it his own. There was a warmth in his approach, a gentleness I'd never fully mastered. I watched him negotiate peace between alien refugees and a skeptical Earth city. He didn't punch his way through it. He listened. He made them feel heard. And they responded. We started working together more often after that. At first, people called him Superboy, but that changed quickly. The world saw what I saw. John wasn't just following in my footsteps. He was carving his own. So we made it official. 2 Supermen, side by side. It was strange at first, the world adjusting to the idea. 2 men flying through the sky, both bearing the same crest, the same mantle. But we never competed. We never needed to. I think that's the part that surprised people the most. There was no tension, no rivalry, just a shared goal to help, to protect, to be the best versions of ourselves for the people who needed us. We divided our focus. I handled deep space threats, galactic emergencies, while John took care of Earth more directly. He became a bridge between generations, young enough to connect with the new wave of heroes, strong enough to stand with the veterans, and sometimes, on quiet nights, we just flew, side by side, above the clouds, where the world looked peaceful and small. We didn't always talk. Sometimes it was enough just to be there, together. One night, as we hovered over the city, John turned to me and said, "Do you ever get tired?" I smiled. "Not of this." He nodded. "Me neither." That was the moment I knew. He was ready for anything. There's a deep comfort in that realization, knowing that when my time does finally end,
Whether it's tomorrow or 100 years from now, there will still be a Superman, a good one, a better one, and the symbol we wear, it'll mean something long after we're gone. There are some days I wish I could forget, not because I'm ashamed, but because remembering them hurts. One of those days started like any other, quiet. The kind of morning that makes you believe the worst is behind you. I remember flying with John above the Pacific. The sun was just rising, casting gold across the water. We were talking about something simple, movie nights with Lois, his favorite breakfast cereal, nothing heroic, just life. Then the call came in, the Justice League alert, a signal we all knew too well. Emergency, immediate response required, no time to breathe. I looked at John. He nodded once. We both knew this wasn't a drill. When we arrived, the sky over Coast City was wrong. The air shimmered, distorted like heat over pavement, but colder, heavier. Something ancient was piercing through dimensions, a rift tearing open between worlds, and from it came a presence older than time, untouched by reason or mercy. We didn't know its name then, only its purpose, to consume, to erase. Even Batman looked shaken. He handed me a data slate, readouts that meant nothing, and everything. Not even the Green Lantern Corps could stop it, he said. We called you two first. John and I didn't wait. We flew in together, straight into a force that felt like pure entropy. No enemy to punch, no mind to reason with, just destruction. Its very presence sapped our strength. My heat vision barely scratched it. John's blows passed through its form like mist, but still we tried. We shielded civilians, pulled survivors from collapsing buildings, worked side by side, like we had for years, and for a moment, I thought we could push it back. Then I saw John fall. It wasn't from injury, no visible wound, no explosion. It was like something had reached inside and pulled at his very core. I caught him mid-air. He was gasping, pale. I felt fear in a way I hadn't in years. I took the fight to it alone. I don't remember all of what happened, only flashes, the city fading, buildings crumbling, my mind screaming for some kind of solution. I remember shouting for help, any help, and I remember a response, magic. Zatanna and Dr. Fate arrived in time to contain the breach, but just barely. It took every ounce of arcane energy they had, and even then, we lost half the city's skyline. The rift sealed behind a veil of spellwork, but we all knew it wasn't over, just postponed. Afterwards, I sat with John on a rooftop. He had his head in his hands, silent, not injured, but shaken in a way I hadn't seen before. I wasn't strong enough, he whispered. I couldn't even touch it. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Neither could I. That day taught us something we both needed to remember, that even together, even as two supermen, we're not invincible. We can't stop everything, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. Sometimes, the job isn't about winning. It's about standing between the world and the darkness, even when you know you can't hold it back forever, especially then. That's what the Tseti stands for, not strength, hope. And hope isn't about always succeeding, it's about never ever giving up. People think that because I wear this symbol, because I can fly, because bullets bounce off my chest, because I've come back from death itself, that I don't know what it means to lose. But I do. I know it in ways most never see. Because the truth is, being Superman doesn't mean you win every time. It means you try, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. There was a day, not long after the battle with that thing from beyond the rift, when I sat alone in the Fortress of Solitude. No alarms, no battles, no calls for help, just silence, the kind that creeps in when everything stops, and you finally have time to think. I was holding a photo, one of the old ones, Lois, John, and I, laughing. A rare day when I didn't have to be Superman, just Clark, just Dad, just me.
I remember wondering if I'd failed them, if trying to be everything to everyone had made me less to the ones who mattered most, and worse, I wondered if I was slowly losing myself to the cape, because that's the part no one prepares you for. The more you give, the more people expect, and the harder it is to step back. And yet, I've also learned something else. Loss is not the end. It's the measure of what you care about. You can't lose something unless it mattered, and you don't feel that weight unless you tried to hold on with everything you had. I've lost battles, I've lost cities, I've lost people, but I've never lost hope. I've been buried beneath rubble, gasping for air. I've floated through space, unsure if I'd ever make it home. I've seen worlds end, and timelines unravel, and futures vanish before they began. And each time, I've stood back up, not because I'm invulnerable, but because someone needed me to. Because someone, somewhere, was watching. And if they could see me stand again, maybe they could too. That's what being Superman really is. Not the powers, not the suit, not the legacy. It's the refusal to stay down, to rise, even when rising feels impossible, to keep flying, even with the weight of the world on your back. So when people ask me what it means to lose, I tell them this: it means you're trying, it means you care, and it means when you finally rise again, you'll carry more than pain. You'll carry purpose. There are a lot of stories about me. Some are true, some not so much. But if there's one thing I wish more people understood, it's this: the best part of my life has never been the flying. It's never been the saving. It's her. It's Lois. I met her the first week I started at the Daily Planet. I was nervous, new city, new job, still trying to keep a handle on everything I could do. I remember fumbling with my tie, trying to look the part of a mild-mannered reporter. And then she walked in, Lois Lane, already a legend in the newsroom, already fearless, already more alive than anyone I'd ever met. She barely looked at me that first day. I don't blame her. She had work to do, a byline to chase, a world to question. But me, I was captivated. She didn't treat me like someone who needed to be saved. She challenged me. She demanded truth from everyone, even from me, especially from me. She could see through people like glass, which made it all the more terrifying when I realized I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't, not yet. So I settled for coffee runs, for nervous banter in the break room, for quiet admiration from across the bullpen, and somehow, little by little, she let me in. Not as Superman, as Clark. It was strange, learning to be vulnerable in the one way I wasn't used to, not physically, emotionally, letting someone know who I really was, not the suit, not the powers, just the farm boy with a pen and a heart, too full for his chest. When I finally told her the truth, I thought she'd walk away. Instead, she laughed. "I've known for a while," she said, "but I needed you to be the one to say it." That was Lois, brilliant, brave, always 10 steps ahead. We built something slowly, amid the chaos, the headlines, the world constantly needing saving. We built a life, a home, and eventually, a family. John changed everything. The moment I held him, I realized something. It's one thing to care about the world. It's another thing entirely to be responsible for one small piece of it. Lois made sure I didn't forget that. She grounded me, reminded me to be human, to be present. There were nights I'd come home bruised and bone-weary, and she'd be there, waiting calm, stronger than I'd ever been. She never asked me to stop being Superman. She just asked that I never stop being Clark, and I tried. I still try. Not every day was easy. There were arguments, moments I missed too much, times the weight of the world took me too far from the people I loved most. But Lois never gave up on me, never once. She was my lighthouse, still is. People see me and think I'm the strong one, but the truth is, I'd fall without her. She taught me that the most powerful thing I could ever do was choose to come home. People think I've always been him, that once I put on the cape, it never came off. But that's not true. There were days I walked away, and not just for a moment, or a weekend, or to heal some bruises. I mean really walked away, from the skies, from the League, from the S itself. The first time, it was after Doomsday. You probably know the story. He came out of nowhere, pure rage, unstoppable, mindless destruction in a body that couldn't be reasoned with, and I died, stopping him. I don't remember all of it, just flashes, pain, fear, Lois's voice, and then, darkness. When I came back, something was different, not just in me, but in them. The world had moved on. 4 people had tried to take my place: Steel, Superboy, the Eradicator, Cyborg Superman, some with good hearts, others, not so much. But they all proved something. The world didn't just need Superman, it wanted him, expected him. That was heavy, heavier than any villain I've faced. So after I returned, after the parades, the reunions, the tears, I left, quietly. No press release, no farewell tour, just me, Lois, John, and silence. We moved, found a house far from Metropolis. I worked as a farmer again, just like my dad. John was still little then. We taught him to ride a bike, to fall, and get back up. He didn't know about the cape yet, just that his dad was strong, and kind, and always came inside when dinner was ready. Those years were precious. I needed them, more than I can ever say, but there was always a whisper, in the back of my mind, a cry I could still hear, even from across the world. Eventually, I'd feel it, that pull, a building collapse, a child in danger, a city looking to the sky, hoping, and I'd break. I'd go, suit, or no suit. The world doesn't wait for you to heal. So yes, I walked away, more than once, after Zod, after Brainiac, after the war on Apocalypse. Each time, I told myself I was done. Each time, I believed it, until someone needed saving, and then it didn't matter if I was ready, because being Superman, it's not a choice I make every morning, it's who I am, even when I don't want it to be. But what I've learned, is that it's okay to rest. Even heroes need to breathe. Even I need to remember who I am, beneath the cape. Clark Kent, father, husband, son, and every time I return, I'm stronger. Not just because I rested, but because I remembered why I wear the symbol in the first place. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. There's a weight I carry, not one you can see, but it's always there. And no matter how many lives I save, no matter how many times I show up just in time, I'll never forget the ones I didn't. Her name was Rebecca. She wasn't famous. She didn't live in a city I usually patrolled, just a quiet town, middle of nowhere. I was halfway across the planet, stopping a flood in Southeast Asia when I heard the call. A police scanner crackling through my suit's receiver. A kidnapping, one suspect, one girl, 9 years old. By the time I reached the town, it was already too late. They found her body in the woods. I'd flown halfway around the world in under 6 minutes, and it wasn't enough. I remember floating above that town, just hovering, listening to everything, every breath, every heartbeat, trying to find someone to blame, but there was no villain here. No super-powered madman, just a broken human being. One I caught, one the courts would deal with, but none of it brought her back. And that's the part people don't see, that sometimes I'm not fast enough. Sometimes I fail. I used to visit her grave, quietly, at night. I brought flowers once. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it would make a difference. Maybe I thought if her parents ever found out, they'd understand. They never knew I was there, that I sat in the dirt beside her name and said I was sorry, that I still am. There are people who believe Superman can do anything, and I've let them believe it, because maybe that hope, that illusion, is better than the truth. But the truth is this: I can't save everyone. I try. I always try. But I'm one man, a man with limits. A man who still wakes up some nights, hearing a scream he couldn't silence. I don't tell this story often, because it doesn't inspire, it doesn't end with triumph. It just is. But it's a part of me, because being Superman isn't just about the victories, it's about carrying the losses too, living with them, letting them remind you of what's at stake. So when people ask me why I keep going, why I keep trying, I think of Rebecca, and I whisper, because someone else still needs me. That's why I get back up. That's why I fly, even when it hurts. Bruce Wayne and I, we were never the same. Not in how we thought, not in how we fought, not in how we loved, or feared, or hoped, but somehow, through everything, the battles, the disagreements, the silence, we became brothers. Not by blood, but by burden. He was Batman, long before I put on the cape. He didn't fly, he didn't have powers. But there were nights I looked at him and thought, he's stronger than I am. He carried so much, and he carried it alone. I tried, more times than I can count, to pull him out of that darkness. Sometimes, I succeeded. Most times, he just nodded and kept walking into it anyway. The last time we spoke, really spoke, wasn't in a war zone or a Justice League meeting. It was in his study. The manor was quiet, too quiet. Alfred had passed the year before. Damian was off-world. Gotham, for once, was sleeping. Bruce sat in a chair by the fire. He didn't wear the cowl, just an old gray sweater, a cup of tea in his hand, and he looked tired. I told him I was worried, that he was working himself too hard. He smirked, that half smile I'd seen more in recent years than I ever had before. Pot, he said, meet kettle. We talked that night, not about villains or patrols or missions. We talked about life, about legacy, about what it meant to be symbols in a world that had changed so much. He told me he envied me, not the powers, not the invulnerability, but the way people looked at me, with trust. They never looked at me that way, he said. They respected you, I told him. They feared me. I leaned forward. Sometimes fear is what saves them, Bruce. You've saved more people in that city than I could have ever reached. He didn't respond right away, just stared into the fire for a long while, and then he said something I'll never forget. You gave them hope, Clark. I gave them a reason not to fall apart. There was a pause. Then he looked at me, really looked. When I'm gone, he said, promise me something, anything. Don't try to become me. Don't carry my weight. Yours is enough. I nodded. And what about you? He smiled again, tired, small. I'm proud of what we built. That was the last real conversation we had. He died a few months later, peacefully, in the manor. No explosion, no final battle, just silence. I gave the eulogy. People expected something grand, something poetic, but all I said was this: he was the best of us, even when he couldn't believe it himself. And then I looked at the cowl resting on the podium, and I said, good night, Bruce. That night, I stood on the roof of the manor alone, and for the first time in years, I looked out over Gotham, not with worry, but with respect, because I understood what he carried, and what he left behind. A legacy built in shadows, a legend that will never need a cape to be remembered. It's strange, the first time you meet yourself. Not in a mirror, not in a memory, but face to face with another version of you, standing there, breathing, thinking, different. I remember the first time it happened, a rip in space, a flicker of unstable reality, one of those things the Justice League never gets used to. And then, there he was, another me, taller, somehow, his suit darker, a red streak in his eyes that hadn't faded. He called himself Kal-El. No Clark Kent, no Kansas, no Earth parents. He ruled a world, not protected it. And he was tired,
He told me his Lois had died in a bombing, one he couldn't stop, that his grief twisted into order, that order became law, and law became control. He didn't start as a tyrant, he became one, to make sure pain never returned. His world was peaceful, silent, fearfully obedient. He asked if I envied it. I said no. He didn't believe me. And then there was the other one, the one who never left Smallville, never discovered his powers fully. He was a farmer, married to Lana Lang, 3 kids, a worn denim jacket, and a back that ached from honest work. He asked me if I was happy. I didn't know how to answer. In the multiverse, I've met dozens of versions of myself, some kinder, some crueler, some who became monsters, some who died before they ever had the chance to become anything at all. There's a Clark who turned into Doomsday, a Clark who became Batman after Bruce died, a Clark who never left Krypton and watched Earth burn from a distance. They all carry something different. Some carry guilt, some carry rage, some carry nothing at all. But they all ask me the same thing. Do you think you're the real one? And every time, I say, I don't know, but I try to be the right one. Because in a sea of infinite possibility, where every decision splits into 1,000 more, there's no such thing as the Superman, just the one who chose this path, this life, these people, and I wouldn't trade it for any other. Sometimes, when I wake from dreams of those other worlds, I hold Lois a little tighter. I call John, even if it's just to hear his voice. I look up at the sky and whisper, thank you, because in all the versions of me that exist, I got to be the one who had all of this, not because I deserved it, but because I never stopped believing it was possible. I didn't notice it all at once. There was no moment where I looked in the mirror and saw an old man staring back. It came slowly, quietly, like the fading of sunlight at the end of a long day. You don't realize the shadows have stretched until they're already at your feet. At first, it was little things. The cape felt heavier not physically, but in memory. I wasn't as fast to leap into the air, not because I couldn't, but because I wanted to take in the silence a little longer. There was a time when I could hear a cry for help from anywhere on Earth. Now, some of them take a little longer to reach me, but that's okay, because I've learned something with age. Urgency doesn't always mean rushing. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is pause, breathe, and listen. Lois's hair grayed before mine ever did. She used to joke that I cheated, that my Kryptonian biology didn't play fair. But one day, I looked at her and realized how beautiful time had made her. Every line, every wrinkle, it all told a story, and I hoped, in some quiet way, I wore mine just as well. John had grown by then, not just in power, but in presence. He didn't need me to guide him anymore. He was guiding others, leading, becoming something beyond even my wildest hopes. I stopped flying every day, started walking more, started reading more, started sitting on porches and watching sunsets like my dad used to. People still recognized me, even with the glasses off. They'd nod, smile, say thank you, and I'd smile back, because I remembered each one of their faces, maybe not the names, but the moments, and that's what mattered. Batman was gone by then. Diana had returned to Themyscira. The League had changed its face more times than I could count. And me, I was still here, still watching, still believing, because even in old age, even with slower steps and a softer voice, I still had hope. One day John and I flew together again, just for a few minutes. I let him take the lead. He looked back at me and grinned. Race you to the moon. I laughed. You go ahead. I hovered there, just above the Earth's edge, staring down at the world I'd spent a lifetime protecting. It looked no different than it did 50 years before, but it felt different, calmer, stronger. brighter, and maybe, just maybe, I had something to do with that. Getting old isn't a curse, not when you've lived with purpose. It's a gift, a chance to see the seeds you planted grow, to watch the world carry on without you, and know it's going to be okay.
If you're still listening, thank you. That means something. It means you stayed with me. Through the fights, the fear, the flights, the failures, through the quiet nights and the bright skies. You've heard my story. Now, let me leave you with what I've learned. First, strength is not what you can lift. It's what you can carry, and that includes fear, pain, love, and sometimes loss. Second, truth matters, even when it's inconvenient, even when it hurts, even when no one else wants to hear it. If you can speak truth with kindness, with clarity, with courage, you can change the world. Third, hope is a choice, not a feeling, not a mood, a choice. You wake up and decide to believe that something better is possible, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. I've learned that no one is just one thing, not even me, not even Superman. I've been a son, a husband, a father, a friend, a symbol, a ghost, a burden, a beacon, and if I've learned anything from this strange, beautiful life, it's that the smallest moments are often the most important. Holding John's hand when he was scared, sitting beside Lois while she wrote, helping my dad fix the fence, even though he knew I could do it in a blink, but he didn't want it done fast. He wanted it done together. That's what life is made of, not just the big victories, but the quiet presence, being there, showing up, again and again. I've learned that even a godlike being can feel helpless, and that admitting it, asking for help, is not weakness, it's humanity, and I never want to lose that. I've learned that the cape doesn't make the hero, the symbol doesn't make the man, the power doesn't define the purpose, the heart does, and I've learned that people are good, not perfect, not simple, but good. You have to look past the noise, the anger, the fear. Underneath it all, there's light, there's love, there's potential, and that's why I never gave up. I don't know how much longer I'll be here, but I know this: when I'm gone, someone else will rise. Maybe John, maybe someone not yet born. They'll lift the S again, and maybe if I've done my job right, they'll understand what it really means. Not power, not pride, but hope. And if this is the last time you hear my voice, I'll leave you with this: you don't have to be Superman to make a difference. You just have to care, enough to try, enough to listen, enough to show up. That's what I've learned, and that's what I leave behind. If you're still with me, then maybe you understand now. This wasn't a story about power. It never was. It was about people, about choice, about hope. I don't know what the world will look like when this message is heard. Maybe there will be peace. Maybe there won't. But either way, I want you to know something. You were always worth saving. Even when things were at their worst, when cities fell, when hearts broke, when I doubted everything, I never doubted you. Not the world, not humanity. You see, people think I came here to protect them, and I did. But somewhere along the way, they started saving me too. Lois, with her fire. John, with his heart. Bruce, with his quiet, unspoken strength. My mother and father, who gave me everything and asked for nothing. Even strangers I only met once, who looked up at me like I could actually make things better. And in those moments, I believed I could, not because I was invulnerable, but because they believed first. This world, it isn't perfect, it never was, but it's beautiful and fragile, and full of people trying, every single day, to be a little better than they were yesterday. If I've done anything in my time here, I hope it was this. I hope I showed you that anyone can be a symbol, anyone can wear the S. It's not about flying, it's not about saving the day, it's about showing up, for each other, for yourself,
for the future. So if you're hearing this, wherever you are, whoever you are, don't wait for someone like me. Be the one who steps forward. Be the one who listens, who lifts, who leads. You'll be afraid. You'll fall. You'll lose. But you'll rise too, and when you do, you'll realize what I did. That being a hero isn't about being super, it's about being there. And if I could leave you with only one thing, just one, it would be this: believe in people, in second chances, in the quiet good you do when no one's watching, in the light that still waits to shine through all the darkness. Believe in tomorrow, because I always have, and I always will. This is Clark Kent. This is Kal-El. This is Superman. Thank you for listening, and goodbye, for now.